Now, Bruce, Iron Maiden are pretty big down in South America, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
Now, I've got a question for you. When you've been down there, have you ever been to a bullfight?
I have never been to a bullfight in South America. Played a few bull arenas, but in Spain, we've played bullfight arena on a few occasions. And I did get dragged off to a bullfight once by believe it or not, by my mum and dad when we went on holiday to Spain, like Mallorca or somewhere like that, or whenever it was. And there was a bullfight on and they took me to one. And I found the whole thing, I don't know, a bit incomprehensible, really. I wasn't quite sure why they didn't just, if they were hungry, why they just didn't take the poor beast out the back and sort of shoot it. And then, but anyway, but I was young. I was only about, must have been about 10 or 11 years old. So, so the fact that the guest that we've got on now, he's a fascinating character.
You're right. We've got one of the guests the guest who's joining us today is, I suppose you can say he's as controversial as he is fascinating. Because he is a real-life bullfighter. Not only that, he's British, and he's Britain's, as you say, he's Britain's only bullfighter. He's also, hey Bruce, what about this? He is also an old Etonian, and he is Eton's officially most badass pupil. Apparently, when he was there, he was sent to see the headmaster 68 times. So
which means what? He was flogged, basically.
Well, it's
beaten.
Definitely a red flag. See what I did there? Red flag. Never mind. Yeah. Anyway, never mind. Look, with a name like Alexander Fiske-Harrison, it's crying out for a knighthood, isn't it? Eton's most badass pupil and Britain's only bullfighter. We've got to have him on, haven't we? Xander, lovely to have you on Psycho Schizo Espresso today. Fantastic to catch up after the past 18 months as well.
Xander, I've never met a bullfighter before. From that perspective, I've been to a couple of bullfights. My parents took me when I was very small, and it seemed to take an awfully long time to kill the beast. I'm not sure if they did actually kill it in the end. I mean, I'm not sure if they take it out the back and shoot it if it doesn't sort of like die in the ring. My thought on it was, there was clearly something kind of ritual going on, but I was probably too young to appreciate it fully. As a meat eater, unapologetic meat eater, and as somebody who would, I'd be comfortable with not slaughtering animals en masse, but I'd possibly, if somebody said, "Go on then, if you can shoot it, you can eat it," I'd be happy with that. But where in that panoply of killing animals and eating them is bullfighting, and why does it still exist?
That's the best phrase opening question that I've had so far. I'm not sure how long it's been since I've been answering questions of bullfighting. Is why does it take so long? Because I was recently back in church, and I'm by no stretch of the imagination a deep believer, but I'd forgotten how long a church service takes, and it's comparable. It's comparable in that manner. What you're dealing with, I mean, there's several acts to a bullfight, and unless you grew up watching it, or for whatever other reason you read your Hemingway and became fascinated by it from afar and watched it on videos as you can now do on YouTube, most people go to it and expect to see the end of it, which is the beautiful passes with the animal. And if you know a little bit, there's a dance involved in that. And then the death, the killing. And people don't realize that, oh no, it goes on a little bit longer than that. Each bull takes 20-something minutes. It's a ritual sacrifice. And you used the word ritual or a comparable word earlier on. It's exactly that. And so as long as it takes to get to the end of the ritual, because it's ritual, because it's based on tradition, because it's based on whatever, that's how long it takes. And one could argue for change in it. But then what you'd be doing is sort of the tip of the iceberg with bullfighting is any bit you give up of it, you give it all up. If you rationalized it, it wouldn't exist. But so the reason why it does take as long as it does, which is little known, is to get that dance at the end between matador and bull, is you have to bring the head down and tire out the animal. There's various ways you could do it, but if you just had, the British are obsessed with sports and fair play, if you had a man go out with the red cape, the muleta, and a sword, it would take 45 minutes to an hour each bull. And you could bring a bull down, so its head went down, so you could go over the horns with the sword, so you could execute it in the traditional manner. But it would take 4 times as long. Okay.
But what I'm trying to get now, going to another example, this one's slightly more comedic, but probably more injurious to human health than bull health. I was doing a festival somewhere, I think it was in France or something, and in the middle of the festival they had bullfighting but for stupid humans.
Oh yeah.
So they get pissed up and they jump in an arena, and there was a bull with horns, quite pissed off really. I think they must have kept it up late, and it had a couple of rubber bungs on the end of its pointy horns, but other than that, this bull was quite capable of taking a human being and tossing it a long way into the air. And basically, people just paid to see if they could survive in the arena with a pissed off bull. So I actually didn't have a problem with that, because I thought, well, that seems fair play. The bull's a wild animal. If people are stupid enough to jump into it and say me versus a bull,
the funny thing is, I mean, so the world of the bulls is like the world of horses, for example. In the world of horses, you have horse racing, dressage, show jumping, polo, point to points, whatever, pony club. You've got a whole spectrum. In the world of the bull, it's the same. So you have the very formalized corrida, the bullfight, as we call it, the matador wearing the suit of lights, wearing his gold, going out and doing that in the Spanish manner. But that you also have the course Landais, the course Camarguais in the south of France, which is a different...
Xander, for a minute there, I thought you were going to say you had like bull puissance, bull show jumping. I thought we were going down that road there for a minute. But,
one of my dearest friends, because I like to run with the bulls as well. I have aside from bullfighting, I do bull running in Pamplona, and there's 15,000 bull running events a year in Spain.
Now, Xander, can I just interrupt there? Yeah. Because, Bruce, I didn't tell you about this. So Xander actually runs with, and I've written the name of this guy down, with a guy called Dennis Clancy, who's in the 101st Airborne Division.
And Xander... And 6 Special Forces Group,
And 6 Special Forces Group. And he actually he teaches people to run with the bulls in Pamplona. And I'm thinking that perhaps one of the follow-ups might be, if you fancy taking your life in your hands, we could see what it's all about down there. I don't know.
No, not with my dodgy hip. I couldn't bloody run fast enough, let me tell you.
But you do run courses down there, don't you, Xander?
Yeah, no, we run courses. There's a company, it's based in the United States, called Running of the Bulls Incorporated, and which the Spanish don't like the name of. But they do, you can watch bull running and the bull fights in Pamplona, but for the VIP groups and for other people as well. Dennis will teach you how to run. I run with Dennis. So I to be honest, I'd rather hand off teaching how to run to him. But I'll teach people.
Bruce, there's a song in that, isn't there? Isn't there a song, Run to the Bulls? Isn't that
exactly.
One of your songs? Yeah?
Yeah.
Maybe not. I don't know. Just an idea there.
But on the other side, we teach people how to bullfight as well. You can do that.
Are you Britain's only bullfighter? Is it because I don't know any other bullfighters? Are you the only one in the UK?
Well, there's Frank Evans, and I will never take away from Frank, because every time I see him in Seville or wherever, he'll always, we salute each other, and he's 70 years old or something. And he became a full matador. I didn't become a full matador. He took it all the way through. And he was a butcher from up north, he worked as a butcher. And that's something, by the way, that you have to take into account with bullfighting. Every bull ring is a EU registered abattoir. That's what it is. The animal goes in and it comes out as meat. And so any notion of, being sporting or not, the bull's always going to die. It's actually pre-sold, the meat, before it goes in. It's just another sort of abattoir. It's just that bulls live 3 times as long as a bull normally does.
Of the different cuts of meat on a bull, right?
We like to eat children. We like to eat children. We don't eat adult animals. We eat lamb, we don't eat mutton, and it's the same with the bull.
Right. Okay. So these are young bulls.
No. The ones killed in the ring, they're subsidized by the bullfight. But when you eat beef, you're eating calf. So you eat 18-month-old cattle, be they male or female, cow or bull. In Spain, the only way a bull can live to that age, 5 years old, by law, it has to be between 4 and 6 years old to enter the ring. The only way it lives that long on a farmer's pasture is if someone pays it to go into the ring. So it's subsidized to live longer by the box office from the bull ring.
So first of all, so that bull's obviously a valuable commodity because it's had a lot of investment put into it to get to that stage.
Yeah, it costs on average, it costs 10 times more than a meat bull would.
Right.
I'm trying to get my figures in my head. I mean, they sell them for a really good one. Victorino Martin sells his at about 25,000 euros per bull to Madrid. Right. Now, given that this animal ends up dying, it's not a racehorse. It can't keep competing. That premium is based on the box office takings of the Madrid bull ring.
Right. But what I'm getting to there is if I buy or pre-buy a bit of rump steak from a prime bull that's like been killed, is there a premium price? And is there a premium cut on a bull? I'm thinking, for example, the balls. Do the testicles of a bull that's killed in the ring have an extra cachet whereby people go, I've got to eat a bit of bull's bollock because that bull has been in the ring and it's going to give me a bit of oomph, put lead in my pencil, more than the regular normal human being. Like the matador, because the matadors have that thing as well, don't they? I mean, matadors are very sexy. Come on. I mean, they are. I mean, do you get matador groupies? You've got to, surely.
Zander, I think you've pulled here, mate.
I have seen scenes outside a bull ring when the matadors enter, and I won't go too far into that. But I mean, come on, you were front man for Iron Maiden. You must know.
Yeah, but I wasn't doing anything nearly as dangerous as running around with a wild animal, trying to stuff 2 horns in me.
We'll take what you have.
I was just making the 2 horns,
Bruce has put his red shirt on specially for you today, Zander.
I did.
Just specially for you.
It's making me feel aggressive, even though bulls are technically colorblind. But anyway. But
is that one of these misnomers, actually?
Yeah,
sorry, Zander. Is that one? I wanted to clear that up. Is that a misnomer? Is it?
They have dichromatic vision, so they don't see any distinction between. They see the cape, a red and yellow, for example. That they would see it as the same color. So when you hold the red cape over the sand, it's just a darker version. What they perceive as movement, they're like T-Rex in Jurassic Park. They will go for any movement. What the matador's doing is he will put, if you watch him he edges up towards the bull with his feet, and he gets slower and slower because he watches the bull's head rise. And as it rises, he goes, okay, right, you're now defending this territory here. And then he will reach in with the cape into the territory and go, okay, now. And he uses sound and movement. Nothing to do with color. And he'll go, hey, toro, hey. And then it will come and then he will pass it through and bring it back and pass it through. And that's where the dance comes from. It's an invocation of aggression through sound and movement and basically stepping into the territory of a deeply territorial animal.
So Zander, I was going to ask you, so you've written this fantastic book, which I read when it first came out, Into the Arena, The World of the Spanish Bullfight, which was, it was shortlisted for the William Hill Sportsbook of the Year prize, wasn't it?
It was.
Which was, absolutely fantastic. And it is a very, very good book. A couple of questions for you based on that. I mean, what do you think bullfighting is? On the basis of what you just said, is it a sport? Is it an art? Is it a dance? What is it? I can't quite get my head around it. And the second question, of course, which I have to ask is, what on earth made you get into bullfighting in the first place? How did you move into that?
Those are two very separate questions, and the answer to the second one, if I may take it as Christopher Hitchens used to say, if I can take the question in two parts. The second part refers to you, Mr. Dutton, Professor Dutton, and how you and I got to know each other, but as in how I got into it, because I lack any conscience.
Right.
But
quite a few of those on this Zoom today, I think. But
to take the first one, what is it? It's written about in the art section of the newspapers. It used to be like the distinction between sport and notions of fair play and rules. That's quite a modern thing. Give something a sporting chance. That's also quite an English thing or a British thing. That doesn't apply to bullfighting, but you can get into it that way. There are other versions of it, as Bruce said, about, you can run around with a bull, jump over it, whatever. That's called not rejoneo, Christ, I've forgotten the name, recortes. And these are guys who I run with in the street in Pamplona. I'll have on my right 101st Airborne, on my left a great recortes expert, next to him a matador, next to him or whatever. Everyone gets together for those sort of things, but it's a divided world internally. But in terms of it's based upon the emotional movement of the audience. If you can move an audience, you can charge $1 million for an afternoon or €1 million. Jose Tomas turned down, and he's the greatest living matador. He turned down $1.5 million for 2 afternoons in Seville. He said, I don't need the money. And I realize that's not at the same level as football, as they say in America, soccer players. It's not at that level, but still $1 million for an afternoon, $1 million for 2 hours work. That's quite serious money. These guys get that, and that it's entirely on the basis of, no one assumes they're going to be killed. It's not sporting. They're not awarded points. There are no judges. It's how much they move the audience, and the owner of the bull ring offers them that share of the box office. So it's entirely based on audience appreciation. So as such, they're equivalent to, singers in heavy metal bands, or equivalent to Hollywood actors. Why do we give them that much money? Well, that's what the box office taking is. So as a direct result of that, I'd say it's nothing to do with sport, and all bets are off in terms of rules. In terms of why did I get into it, the very simple thing was I, funnily enough, was doing another form of performance. I was acting in the West End, and I wasn't doing very well. But I was always writing as well, and I was acting a play which I'd written. And I'd written an article where I said the English are hypocritical about bullfighting, because at the very same time the Spanish traditionally sit down to watch a bullfight, which is 6 p.m. on a Sunday, or traditionally actually it was 5 p.m., but they moved it. They would sit down to watch a bullfight, and the English go, this is terrible. And yet they would sit down with a factory farmed roast beef in their stomach to watch David Attenborough narrate as a lion eviscerates a buffalo. And you go, wait a second, because that's the traditional time of, the great BBC export, which is nature documentaries.
Amazingly, this is not rehearsed. I've actually got this. I've written this quote down, the quote that you wrote. It was for Prospect magazine.
12 years
back
ago.
Back in 2008.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you wrote, there is something ironic about British families sitting down to watch wildebeests eviscerated by lions on Big Cat Diary after a nice joint of roast beef, while deploring their Spanish cousins when they are sitting down to watch a bullfight.
Yeah.
It's quite a powerful. It's a powerful sentence, that, and I think that, I mean, it's interesting because you were talking about, how you and I got to meet when we met over. You wrote a review of Wisdom of Psychopaths. Now, it's really interesting because with Wisdom of Psychopaths, a very controversial book in its day, and I'd set out to put the argument that actually psychopaths aren't all bad. There are some psychopaths which who can actually be good and benefit society. Very controversial argument at the time. And you were, I remember, wrote a very flattering review of that book, and actually waded in on my side. And I think we're actually embroiled in more battles than I was at one stage of the proceedings, for which I thank you. But eventually now, I think, what is it now since that book came out, 10 years on? Yeah. I think many people would say that I'd probably won the argument, or at least it's much more acceptable than it was. With you, first of all, did you set out to kind of change people's minds about bullfighting? And if you did, do you think you succeeded?
That's a fascinating thing. I think the first ever time I went on television, was Al Jazeera, and they were debating the bullfighting ban in Catalonia, in Spain, which they subsequently did. And I'd never been on television before, and I went off and did this interview. And I was asked by the interviewer, and I was sitting next to a guy who I went on to have a very adversarial relationship with, who was running the largest anti-bullfighting charity in the world, out of Holland. And he was their spokesman. But we got on quite well in the studio. And afterwards, as we walked out and we were in the lift going up, he said, I hope you recover. Because I began, as you know, as an undergraduate biologist. Animal conservation's my thing. I still work European Nature Trust. I'm still working in ecology and conservation, and animal welfare too, ironically enough. But he said,
Zonda, you put the schizo in Schizo Espresso. Because you also, as you said, you also run a donkey in the horse sanctuary as well, don't you?
Yeah. Equine orphans of the coronavirus in Andalusia. But wait a second, because that moves on to not your second book, because I know you've done many, but in my consciousness, your second book, which is Black and White Thinking, which is the notion of nuance. Because now I did fight the good fight on behalf of, not that you needed anyone fighting on your behalf, but I was so used to just slogging it out in the trenches on social media and wherever else, the comments section of my own articles, which all my proper journalist friends tell me, never do that. Why would you go down there and fight against these maniacs? And I go, well, actually, because it's kind of fun. I do actually genuinely find it fun. And I'm not sure if I convert anyone, but who knows? But you had a very clear point, which was a humane point and a blatantly humane point. One of my great takeaways from the Wisdom of Psychopaths was essentially, if you could study your brain surgeon who was about to remove your tumor, you'd rather have a psychopath than a not, because his hand wouldn't shake. And this was confirmed in that brilliant book by Britain's leading neurosurgeon, Do No Harm.
Henry Marsh.
Do No Harm, right, where he said to his students, look around this room. These are all vegetables. I created everyone in this room. Unless you're willing to do that, don't get into my side of medicine. Go into pediatrics or go into whatever. But on the side of the schizo element, is I knew I was going to never win with bullfighting, and they asked me on Al Jazeera, have you fallen out with friends? Do you seriously think you'll convert anyone? No, I never did. But I still believe that the point was correct. I did actually, funnily enough, convert 3 or 4 people who are old friends of mine, and their opinion's more important to me than most. I don't mind whether or not, the endless death threats, and referring back to Pamplona, running with 101st Airborne, and the British Army as well, is I've had people say, I'm going to come to your house and kill you. And I've had this, and I've always, I'm not going to put my address on my blog under the comments, thelасtarena.com, by the way.
They'd have to get over the moat first, wouldn't they? And then you got the ramparts.
Yeah, exactly. And we have a lot of staff to get through.
Couldn't you just put a couple of really, really angry bulls in the front yard?
Well, no. But
say, please come in. And if you talk to these bulls, just explain.
But Bruce, I always answer the comment because I have the option of publishing the comment or not. And I would publish the comment and then respond. And I would say, you can find me every day, July 7th to 14th in Pamplona, at 8 a.m. exactly on Calle Estafeta, which is the main street in the bull run. That's the moment the bulls come up. So, if you want to take a pot, take a pot. Yeah. And I always assumed no one would ever come. And I would never forget once. And I think it was Dennis and some of his friends. So it's all 101st all around me. And someone started walking across, which you don't do, the middle of the street as we're waiting. We got maybe 30 seconds before all the bulls come through. And this one guy, and he's looking at me and he starts walking across. And these guys who, they're doing that R&R from 4 tours in wherever it is. And they go, Xander, eyes up. And I went, oh, maybe that's one of them. And they just went, excellent. And then the bulls went through and there was no one there. I mean, literally, either the bull took him or whatever, but it's better for him, I'm guessing, than walking into the middle of those guys.
A short, sharp death.
Indeed.
It's a short, sharp death.
Well, 101st wouldn't have been so kind. But but it is that extraordinary thing. I wasn't trying to convert. I just think it's right. Okay. I think it's a true point. And you made it about psychopaths. And it wasn't, I don't think it was a hard sell. I think it was the phrasing of it on psychopaths and the fact that a lot of people went, we don't want to use that phrasing that way.
Yeah.
But you were always right, Kevin. I mean, I've always said that about you.
Hello, folks. We hope you're enjoying Psycho Schizo Espresso. If you are, then why not head over to www.patreon.com/psychoschizoespresso, where if your brain can possibly take any more of me and Bruce, you can hear and watch unedited versions of our episodes, as well as gain access to exclusive episodes and content. Subscription will cost £4 a month, but you will definitely get more podcast and, dare I say, a little bit more oddcast for your money of me and Bruce talking ad infinitum about everything under the sun psychology related, much to the amazement and frustration at times of our long-suffering producer Adam. If you want to subscribe, folks, go to the bio of this episode where you will find all the links you could possibly require to do so.
I've eaten X number of burgers. Every time you buy a burger, which you don't need to eat, you eat it for the taste, for entertainment. You're putting a kill order down an economic chain that leads to an animal, and therefore you're killing an animal for your entertainment, which was always the argument against bullfighting. We do the same when you order a steak in a restaurant or a burger in McDonald's. You're killing an animal for entertainment.
I'm not a vegan. I'm not a vegan, and I'm not. And I've got to say, if I have a choice between, this is the plant-based alternative or the meat-eating munchy, I go for the meat. I'm going to go for the meat. But if the meat was basically no longer available, or it was extremely expensive because animals were reared for a long time, you shut down. We shut down all the chicken farms. We shut down all the industrial everything. The price of meat goes up, therefore people eat less of it. But it can all be replaced by synthesized, proteinized units, and they're industrial, but they don't hurt anybody. Now, this is a completely hypothetical, but if a world were to exist like that, where would we fit in if we didn't have to super predate?
But wait a second, because that's already occurred. In terms of super predator, is that so you can no longer fight to the level you used to, 4,000 years ago in the streets. We shut down the Roman Colosseum. The gladiators no longer exist. Were boxing to go, for example, I realized we suddenly extended out into MMA. But there's an element in which we are becoming more and more civilized, and we're looking at simulacra, fake versions of, more and more. So you're just talking about it going to meat. It's gone everywhere. I mean, it already exists. We don't watch the death of the animal. And I think there's something very wrong about that, by the way. I would almost issue people with a meat license. When you reach the age of 18 and you're, or whatever age it would be, fully formed, medically speaking, in terms of nutrition, you should have to go and pull the trigger on an animal.
I agree with that. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I think that before you can buy meat at a butcher's, you have to have a license that you visited an abattoir and actually killed an animal.
Yeah.
Until you've done that, you can't buy meat. I don't object to that.
I think
that's a very good idea.
A finger on the trigger moment, and you go, no, I don't want the license. I can't do it.
I don't disagree with that.
There was the opposite occurred a few years ago when, I don't know if you remember, there's an article in the paper in which someone in a village somewhere in England had put out a petition that they didn't want carcasses hanging in butchers' shop windows, because they felt that actually it was upsetting to young children.
If you remember in your neck
past
of the woods, the covered market in Oxford, they always hung outside that butcher's for venison, the whole deer. I think minus the head.
That's right.
And
in the covered market, that's right.
Which is a medieval market that's carried on for whatever it is, 600 years. And that worries me. When people are buying things in plastic, it's very easy to complain. One of the reasons why, because Spain had no industrial revolution, one of the reasons why bullfighting survived is because of the lack of industrial revolution, the move to urbanization. And even when they became urbanized, people still had family in the countryside. So they would go every weekend out to the farm. You would have the ritual killing of the pig. You'd have a killing of a cow or whatever. People would be testing a young fighting bull in a ring. They saw this stuff all the time. So they're inured in the same way that a doctor is inured to death. We'd all love to ban death. It doesn't work out. You can't do it. And
Government's tried.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I hear Jeff Bezos is investing in immortal life, which was a headline that read to me
along with Walt Disney. His head's in a cryogenic tank somewhere, hoping for rebirth. With Tom and Jerry.
The wonderful thing on those cryogenic chambers is someone did an investigation on them, and they discovered that the number of power cuts there's been in the intervening period, that it's thawed out, decayed, and then refrozen. And it's like that old ice cream that's a bit crystallized. And that's what's left.
Xander, I've got to ask you about this because there's a fascinating fact about you. And I'm just looking at it now. You are officially, according to the school magazine, the most badass old Etonian in the school's history, having been sent to the headmaster a total of 68 times in your time at the school. What's all this about?
Because that sounds very low key. I've
undersold you there. Sorry.
But it sounds very, sent to the headmaster. Now that's a school of 1,200 and something pupils. Most people never get sent to the headmaster. You're dealt with internally by your housemaster or whatever. It's true. When I went back for my reunion, it was confirmed by the current provost, Lord Waldegrave, he said, and it was wonderful, it's the 25th anniversary of me leaving, and not me leaving, my year leaving. They didn't celebrate the fact that I left.
They celebrate your leave. I heard they got a plaque up.
Thank God he's gone. But Lord Waldegrave stood up and he gave this great speech, and he went, we have a boy who won Olympic gold, and we have a boy who won, not the Victoria Cross, the military cross. And we have a boy who's, been decorated for being the greatest inner city vicar, helping the poor, and, the Mother Teresa of our generation. We also have the boy who was sent most times to the headmaster since 1440, when the school was founded. Yeah, that was me. That was the one thing that I managed. I was very bad with authority, which probably reads into my endless testing of boundaries, be it the moral boundaries of bullfighting or whatever it is. I've never been one to really accept the authorized version. And so at school, I never turned up to a single class on time, and eventually that caught up with me. But it was never enough to expel me. I've always thought you should be an outsider in the best places. Just don't get kicked out entirely. But I was running the edge.
I failed that one. I
read about you, Mr. Dickinson. I read about you at Oundle. That's right.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, it was progressive. I think they finally kicked me out because one of my first exploits that got me into trouble, really into trouble, was I sent 2 tons of horse shit to the housemaster. Had it delivered onto the front doorstep by this farmer and his tractor. Phoned him up, the farmer, and he delivered 2 tons of horse manure and dumped it on the top step of the house. And
you outclassed me there. You just that's...
And then of course I had to. And the great thing was that he turned up, and him and the farmer nearly came to fisticuffs because he was like a snob and was like, "Oh, go away, you stupid man!" And the farmer was like, "I'm a working man, mate. I haven't got time to sit around here waiting for a toff like you. You put down, I give you I give you a good old knuckles." So anyway, they didn't. He took the manure away. And I got beaten for it, as you did.
Yeah.
I had to own up to, because otherwise he was going to cut off all the power supply to all the studies. There's no stereos, no kettles, So I went, yeah, it was me. He said, "Oh, I thought it'd be you." So beat me, as happened back then. But then as a penance, I was sent to work for 2 weekends with the farmer, like, shoveling horse shit. And he was a great bloke, the farmer. He was brilliant. I shoveled horse shit all afternoon. He sort of took a shine to me and took me down the pub.
That's not the worst. That's not the worst. Being sent out of school is
it's brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. It was great. I mean,
but Bruce, you didn't help matters by pissing in the headmaster's dinner either, did you?
That was the next time I met the headmaster. Yeah, I did. And he ate it as well. So that was even more satisfactory.
Yeah.
And I was sat in front of this headmaster who recently had beaten 16 kids with a birch, one after the other, for a very minor transgression. It's a very strange bloke. Anyway, I'm sat in front of him, and there's no words to do. Whether it's the big authority figure, the head honcho, is sat there, and you're sort of looking at his feet, thinking, your feet are really big, And you think of these things, and he's saying, "I'm afraid this is the end of your school career. You're going to have to leave." I went, "Oh, when?" I'm like, "Next week, next month, next year. Any clue?" He went, "Tomorrow morning." I went, "Oh, well, that's clear then."
Wow.
But you suddenly can't go, "I'm not sure I can take you seriously." I'm like, I was almost like you were the authority figure, but now you've eaten my piss. I just can't take you seriously anymore, And then I went back there. Finally, I went back there. One of the most terrifying days of my life. I went back to the school, and there was the deputy headmaster was a guy who'd formerly been an English teacher there when I was there, and he went, "Oh, hello, mate." He said, "How you doing?" He said, "Don't worry." He said, "We all thought he was a wanker as well." I was like, anyway, yeah. So weird school days, But yeah,
I was also, because I asked a friend of mine who taught me a lot about music when I was at school, and he never got me into Iron Maiden, sadly, but as I wrote to Kevin, Iron Maiden posters were the common currency at school. People traded Iron Maiden posters because they looked so cool. You had such cool posters.
Yeah.
But he got me I went a bit goth for whatever reason in my youth, as you do. Fields of Nephilim.
I could see you.
Yeah,
goth.
Sisters of Mercy, whatever. Give me the dark.
Yeah. And lots of eyeliner.
No. We didn't do. You couldn't do goth like that at Eton. That wasn't possible. But I did wear cowboy boots, black cowboy boots with spurs, wearing full tails. With full tails. Yeah. And I made it
were
one day.
Were they goth Eton tails? Sorry.
That's terrible. That really is terrible. Wow, you've disappointed me.
Well, it's really funny, actually, Lauren, because you said that actually when you were at Eton, there were lots of Iron Maiden posters up, but you said that you didn't hear too much Iron Maiden music.
No, I didn't want to say that out loud, yeah. But no. I'm afraid it was more Led Zeppelin.
There was a poll. I don't know. You obviously know this. There was a poll which was on the internet, and somebody brought it to my attention a couple of weeks ago. that was like, how many celebs out there? They tried to run a little correlation study between celebs wearing Iron Maiden T-shirts and how likely they would be to actually kind of really be into Iron Maiden fans. And it's amazing. Everyone wears Iron Maiden T-shirt. Everyone.
Well,
Lady Gaga is pictured in one. Robin Williams was pictured in one.
The design structure of Eddie, that's just. I was reading all about that last night. Looking forward to this. This podcast is Eddie was an incredible piece of design because he's transmutable across multiple situations. You have him as the face of the pharaohs on a tomb, and then he's holding a gun in a Texas saloon. I mean, it's incredible.
He's the incarnation of eternal adolescence. Is all those conflicts that are in you when you're an adolescent, and there's anger and rage and melancholy and all that stuff, and he's all of those. So
he's also kind of the Grim Reaper.
He's an anti-hero. He's the anti-hero.
And you can put the Grim Reaper in any situation because death is omnipresent. So you could literally, the Grim Reaper is always cool.
So exactly. So you could be walking down a dark street on a foggy night, and you think, "Oh shit, I might turn that corner, and there's Eddie. I'm done for."
Yeah.
And he could be that. But if suddenly round the corner come these two blokes who are your worst nightmare, and you think, "I'm going to get the shit kicked out of me," and suddenly out of the gloom comes Eddie, you think, my saviour, he's going to slice them in half and leave me alone. And that's what would happen. So he's all of those ambivalent things and many more as well. So it's brilliant. He's
So I have to ask, how did you two, because, going on to the fact that the Grim Reaper is cool, and Kevin, who I met because, multiple reasons, but we would both tending towards areas that fascinated us, and Kevin with the wisdom of psychopaths. How did you two meet? And if you've done this before on the podcast, don't spend too long.
One of Kevin's students, was a PhD or an MA student, I think. Was
that's right? Yeah.
Keith. He emailed me because I'm an honorary group captain in the Royal Air Force, Royal Auxiliary Air Force, 601 Squadron, which had many members from Eton, by the way, during the Second World War.
Yeah.
And so he emailed me just as a member and said, "Look, I'm doing this stuff with my mentor, Kevin Dutton, and he'd like to have a chat with you about how to stay sane in the music industry." I went, "Yeah, okay, let's have a little pod. Let's have a chat."
Cool.
So we had a chat. The one thing we really didn't talk about was the music industry. We talked about everything else, and we went, we must continue this. When we can meet up, let's have a meet up. So we did have a meet up, and Kevin's wife said, "You know what? Listening to you two, you should do a podcast."
Yeah.
That's right. We had a very entertaining lunch in a restaurant in London, and she said, "Well, that was kind of like a show," and kind of put the thought in our heads. But the irony was that Bruce is right, actually, Xander. Keith did put us in touch because I was very interested in maintaining sanity in the entertainment industry, and I discovered that Bruce was entirely the wrong person to talk to on that front.
Wait a second.
Having pissed in his headmaster's dinner at Oundle all those years ago, but yeah, and it just basically stemmed from there, really. But one of the things I want to ask you is, now you're now working on a new book, and it's another animal, isn't it? Wolves, and how they shaped human thinking.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Indeed. So, and this bit, I've been working on this for a while. Because obviously COVID stepped in, but also other things too. Sometimes life steps in on a research project if you're not being properly funded. But I tell you what took me with it originally was reading I forget which biological anthropologist it was, but it was about this idea that during the mini ice age, humans were largely wiped out. We were dying out. In anywhere where it's cold, we had sheltering points. And those humans that did survive, their fossils were usually found, they're where you find them buried, their bones, the decayed remains, were with wolves. And those that pointed me towards the idea that only the humans who got on with wolves and adopted them into their tribe, because we were hunter-gatherers at that time, managed to survive, which would be an evolutionary pressure towards, literally your neural array will adapt well with wolves. And obviously wolves being the ancestor of dogs. Then there was a New Yorker piece backing that up about how essentially wolves made us as much as we made wolves. And that seemed to be something to go with as the kernel of an idea on how the evolution of man wasn't just the evolution of man, it was also the animals that made man. And obviously I work and live with horses at the moment, and have done for a little while. But with cattle, in terms of bullfighting, I realize that's one angle of it. But we've domesticated all of these animals. They've made us as much as we've made them. But the very first one was the wolf. And that was 45,000 years ago, I think, is the oldest fossil agreed upon.
I'm going to read that book when it comes out, Xander, because I love wolves.
They're extraordinary.
Gee, Bruce, I didn't know that. I didn't know that you like wolves.
I do like wolves. Okay. I do like wolves. It's one of my favorite monsters. Is they're not really
the werewolf.
Monsters. Is the werewolf. I love the werewolf. I mean, if I had to pick who to be as a monster, whether Frankenstein or a vampire, I'd always pick the werewolf. You get to have fun one night a month.
There's a passage in Darwin when Darwin was writing about the origin of human speech, and he believed that it came from something similar to the way wolves howl. And I remember reading that. This is going back to when I was an undergrad biologist, and that's why we picked them as the first species to domesticate.
Okay.
Because why did we domesticate wolves first? We didn't domesticate horses and cattle and sheep and goats and all the pigs. They're all within the last 10,000 years, 45,000 years back to wolves. They altered us. They allowed us to survive. And if you didn't get on with wolves, you died. They basically, they were a group with very similar social dynamic to humans, who associated with humans because when we were done with a carcass, they could take the refuse. So they hung around human refuse dumps from early hunter-gatherers. Then what would happen would be they would then also alert that human group from other attackers, be they predators or be they other human groups coming in, is the wolves would get disturbed. So there was an evolutionary advantage to having a wolf group associated with your tribe. And then obviously you get wolf cubs, human children. Given the similarity of behavioral structure, social structure, you're going to get domestication events going on. And this is the origin of. And then what happens when you get this massive ice age and everyone's getting wiped out? Human population went down to 10,000 or whatever it was. There's multiple estimates. It might have been larger than that. In these sheltering points, you're walking out over snow. Once you've harnessed the ability of a wolf to hunt an animal, it totally alters your game in a sort of in terms of evolutionary economics. Is in the old days, you would have to hunt down a large animal, an elk or a bear or a bison, whatever, with spears. You could lose 3 or 4 young hunters, young human hunters doing that. It takes you 14 years to create a new human hunter because, you have to grow him, rear him, feed him, then he becomes a hunter. That's very expensive in terms of evolutionary economics. Whereas, and you can see it in the fossil record when we domesticated wolves, slot 2 arrows into a buffalo and let the pack loose. And they will hunt it down and they'll howl for you once they've killed it. And it takes 1 or 2 years to replace the wolf that died on the horns of that bison. It just makes sense. Go with the dog. Always go with the dog. And
Xander, I've got to let you in on a secret here. During lockdown up here in Paris, we were up on the 6th floor and it's like a long sort of like streets in Paris, they're all surrounded things. If it was a full moon, I would sneak out every evening at about 2:00 and I would go, oh, like that. And it would echo all the way down there. I sometimes just do it for a laugh now. You go, who's that bastard howling like a wolf up there? How barking at the moon? So it's great. I have to bark at the moon, unfortunately, and bugger off back to my lair. But I'd love to continue this personally because honestly,
me too.
It's fascinating. Well, yet another episode, yet another hour of your life and our lives, which I hope has enlightened and entertained you, obviously on Psycho, Schizo, Espresso, and there's a lot more to come. But I have to mention Psycho, Schizo, Espresso is a Pod Prod production, and please make sure that you like, subscribe, or leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can get in touch with us by emailing us at pse@podprod.co.uk, and there's the hashtag as well, hashtag Psycho, Schizo, Espresso. And don't forget, you can now become a Patreon, which means you get behind the firewall, as it were, and you get to lift our skirts up and have a look at what's going on underneath, extended episodes and some special things that me and Kevin might do together. If you want to do that, at www.patreon.com/Psycho, Schizo, Espresso for all the unedited and unfiltered episodes, as well as extra bonus content.